Hey crew, it's Pitt and I'm back with some more Gnosis. Today we are diving back into the works of G.R.S. Mead. This is Fragments of a Faith Forgotten. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material and the link for my book, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, let us dive in and continue our exploration of Fragments of a Faith Forgotten with Egypt, and then what's the next one? Is going to be Philo on the Contemplative Life. Egypt. Let us now turn to Egypt and cast a glance on the vista which has to be surveyed, before the outlines of this part of the background of the Gnosis can be filled in. In spite of her reserve and immeasurable contempt for the upstart Greek genius, Egypt had, even in the times of the earliest Ptolemies, given of her wisdom to Greece. There had been an enormous activity of translation of records and documents, the origin of which is associated with the name of Manetho. It is very probable that Plutarch, in his treatise on the mysteries of Isis, drew the bulk of his information from Manetho, and it is very evident that the doctrines therein set forward as the traditional wisdom of Egypt have innumerable points of contact with their Greek Trismegistic literature, those mystic and theosophic treatises which form the manuals of instruction in the inner Hermetic schools, mystic communities which had handed on the wisdom tradition of Teoti, or Tehuti, the god of wisdom, whose name, as Jamblichus tells us, was common to all priests. That is to say, was the source of inspiration of the wisdom tradition in all of its branches. The Greeks, finding in their own Hermes some points of similarity with the characteristics of Teoti, called him by that name with the added title Trismegistus, or thrice greatest, because of his great wisdom. We have done several of the works of Hermes Trismegistus. It is part of the ancient lore and the Esoterica playlist. That the contents, though not the form, of the oldest treatises of this Trismegistic literature were largely Egyptian is further evidenced by Jamblichus in his treatise on the mysteries of the Egyptians and Chaldeans. Along these lines of contact between Egypt and Greece, we can proceed to inspect the Egyptian wisdom on its own soil and find in it many doctrines fully developed, which, without this investigation, we should have considered as entirely indigenous to purely Christian soil. Indeed, in the Trismegistic literature we find a number of distinctive doctrines of Gnostic Christianity, but without the historic Christ, and all of these doctrines are seen to have existed for thousands of years previously in direct Egyptian tradition, especially the doctrines of the Logos, of the Savior and Virgin Mother, of the second birth and the final union with God. But, as in the case of Greece, so in the case of Egypt, within the Egyptian tradition, there are all manners of conflation of doctrines of syncretism and blendings, not only in the external popular cults, but also in the inner traditions. Take a single instance. There was a strong Semitic blend dating from the line of the Hyksos, 2000 to 1500 BC. At that time, Seth, perchance identical with the title of supreme in the tongue of the Semitic conquerors, was a name of great honor. It was identified with Sothis, Sirius, the guardian star of Egypt, the Siriatic land, and the mysteries of Seth were doubtless blended in some fashion with those of Osiris. After the hated Hyksos were expelled, it is true that Seth, or Sed, was gradually identified with Typhon, the opponent of Osiris, the Logos. Alright, so if you are viewing the Logos as opposing anything, you are doing it wrong, right? Here's what the Logos is. This is, as far as I understand, nobody else is saying it this way, so take it with a grain of salt if you wish. But God is infinite. There is no limit placed upon God we do not understand, nor can we comprehend the limits that would be placed upon God. It is infinite in its true original meaning of the word, without definition. When you have defined God, right? This is God, then it becomes the Spirit. That is all of existence. Every single thing that exists anywheres. Every single atom in existence anywheres. And all of the space between those atoms is the Spirit. But if you take the Spirit at the moment when it becomes the Spirit, when it goes from God, the infinite, to Spirit, the finite, that is the beginning. In the beginning, there was God, and God was with. All right, so then whenever there is motion, from the moment that it starts, it's the beginning. But every single instance, every second, every nanosecond, every single instance of change ever from that point forward is the Logos. It is the beginning in motion. Logos, the word, the change, the knowledge, the growth, the fire, the healing, all of it, every single bit of it is the Logos. And so, yes, it is part of creation. Yes, it is the manipulator of change, but it is neither positive nor negative. It contains both positive and negative. It contains growth and destruction. It contains penetration and absorption. It contains all of it. It is completely neutral. The manifestation that happens from that is due to your intentions and the intentions of those around you. Right? Logos is merely a definitional tool for everything. Everything in motion. Right? If there was no motion, it would still be the beginning. But since there is motion, that is Logos. And so the Logos is not Typhon. The Logos is not Set. The Logos is not an opponent to Osiris, other than the thought of Osiris being all of creation, right? There is change, there is decay, there is growth, there is death. All of that contained within the Logos. And so this is not a good understanding of the Logos. I believe that I have a better one. That may be a little bit heady, right? That may be a little bit prideful, but I do not relay it in the manner of me, right? This to me is a self-evident thing upon reflection of the recorded uses of Logos, the instances of Logos, even back to the complete misinterpretation that we find in the New Testament. Right? If you literally read what is literally said in the right way without inserting that this was some dude, then it makes a lot more sense. Back to the text. But this is no more affects the real doctrines of the mysteries of Seth than the fact that the Iranian Aryans used the name Devos to designate evil deities, entities, destroyed the beneficent nature of the Devas of the Indo-Aryans. It simply registers a rivalry of cult and race and points to a previous epoch when there was intimate contact between the races and their religions. Equally so, the Christian use of the term demon does not dispose of the fact that the daimons of the Greeks were beneficent beings. Witness the demon of Socrates, who prevented him as if he were about to do anything not rightly. That is the first time in Esoterica that I have seen the demon of Socrates used correctly, right? What it was the interior voice telling him, hey, that's not the right thing to do. And every time that he listened to that voice, it turned out to be that way. We discovered that from reading Plato, when it was talk about his discussions with Socrates and the relaying of this demon from Socrates directly. Right? Part of the Ancient Lore playlist. We have done several of the works of Plato. And so I'm just pointing out that this is actually used right. Like, this is one of the first times this quote has been used right. The entire time Madame Blavatsky was doing it, it was wrong. This is right. That is actually what happened with the demon. Now, I believe that there are planes of existence, right? There are 8 really, but 7 manifested ones. The 8th one is the return to source, right? We come from 0, we wind up at 8. Nothing to nothing. From to from. It is from source back to source. But in between the 0 and the 8, you have 7 stages, I believe, of cognition or existence, right? The first one is the single point, that is the atom, just free floating. The second one is plant life, that is the ability to grow up but not move over there. The third one is the instinctual animals, those that cannot be trained. They can go over there, but they don't really understand why they go over there. The fourth one is the trainable animals, those that have a better understanding, a little bit of thought, some conception, right? You can train them for things, they can anticipate. They have more of a cognition than the third plane, but they have less of the cognition than the fifth plane. We are on the fifth plane. This is the realm of humanity, the ability to think and understand time. The sixth plane are the elementals and the disincorporated spirits. That is probably where the demon of Socrates would have resided. They have the ability to see forward and backward in time, but not really to understand the complexities that are revealed therein. Whereas the seventh plane of existence, which would be the higher entities, maybe like the personified demons, or the angels, or spirit guides, or things along that nature that actually do have the ability to understand what they see, right? So they can see forward and backwards in time just like the sixth level, but they actually know what that means. And so they can be more deceptive because they can manipulate that. I do believe that there are these entities, even though I do not have a whole lot of experience with them. I have had angelic visitation. I've discussed that before. I have been pulled out of my body in an out-of-body experience with something that I did not see. There was a comforting presence, but there was no physical incarnation. I didn't see God. I just felt myself held by God. Right? I heard things, but I didn't see things. And so that is just for clarification. I do believe that there was something, right? The demon of Socrates was probably a sixth level. It was along the lines of the elementals, the things that when people do seances or Ouija boards, they are contacting these. When they do ceremonial magic and try to bind things, that is probably closer to the seventh level. And so just to point out that I do believe in these things. I don't have proof that I can give anybody. I have experience that I can relay, but I cannot give you my experience. I can only tell you about it. And so I do believe that this was probably sixth or seventh level. If any of that's confusing, we talk about it in some great detail in other places. Back to the text. The ancient, close political relations between Chaldea and Egypt, disclosed by archaeological research and the later Persian conquest of Egypt, must also have discovered points of contact in the domain of religion, especially in the mystery traditions, and future researches in the many hitherto unworked fields of Egyptology will doubtless throw fresh light upon the mixed heredity of religion in Egypt, which is perhaps even more complicated than that of the cults of Greece. That is an understatement. Like, most of the religious traditions that we hold on to now may have been sourced in the Far East, right, in India and possibly even as far as China. But most of the traditions that we get, if they were sourced from there, we don't know that. We know them as coming from Egypt. Most of the things which we believe, right, the entire taking of the various stories that is attributed to Moses, right, most of those stories originate from Egypt, not from the Middle East, where they may have originated from. Again, if that is confusing, we have other playlists, but yeah. In any case, we cannot but feel the sublimity of many of the conceptions of the inner religion of Egypt, in spite of our present inability to classify them in a satisfactory manner. The vast and mysterious background of the cult of Egypt, the sonorous phrases and grandiose titles which we sift out from the present unintelligibility of myth and symbol, persuade us that there was something great working within, and we find the innermost strivings of the mystics devoted to the birth of Horus, a shadowing forth of that greatest of all mysteries, the spiritual birth of man, whence man becomes a god and a son of the Father. The Egyptians themselves, according to Greek writers, looked back to a time when their initiated priesthood was in possession of greater wisdom than was theirs in later times. They confessed that they had fallen away from this high standard and had lost the key to much of their knowledge. Nevertheless, the desire for wisdom was still strong in many of the nation, and Egypt was ever one of the most religious countries in the world. Thus, we find the Jew Philo, in writing of the wisdom lovers about AD 25, declaring that This natural class of men is to be found in many parts of the inhabited world, both the Grecian and non-Grecian world, sharing in the perfect good. In Egypt there are crowds of them in every province, or nome as they call it, and especially round Alexandria. These wisdom lovers Philo calls by the common name of therapeutes, either because they professed an art of healing superior to that in ordinary use, for they healed souls as well as bodies, or because they were servants of a god. He describes one of their communities, which evidently belonged to the circle of mystic Judaism, but the many other communities he mentions were also devoted to the same ends. Their members were strenuous searchers after wisdom and devoted practicers of the holy life. These secret brotherhoods left no records. They kept themselves apart from the world, and the world knew them not. But it is just these communities which were the immediate links in the chain of heredity of the gnosis. We must, therefore, make the most of we can out of what Philo has to tell us of these healers. In order to do this thoroughly, it would of course be necessary to search through the whole of his voluminous work and submit the material thus collected to a critical examination, a task outside the scope of these short sketches. But, as the matter is of vital importance, we cannot refrain from presenting the reader with a translation of the main source in Philo's writings, from which we derive our information. But before giving this translation, it is necessary to prefix a few words by way of introduction. The appearance in 1895 of Conibear's admirable edition of the text of Philo's famous treatise on the Contemplative Life has, at length, set one of the ingeniously inverted pyramids of the origins squarely on its base again. The full title of this important work is Philo, About the Contemplative Life, or the fourth book of the treatise concerning the virtues. Critically edited with the defense of its genuineness by Fred C. Conibear, M.A., this book contains a most excellent bibliography of works relating to the subject. The survival of the voluminous works of Philo, through the neglect and vandalism of the Dark and Middle Ages, is owing to the fact that Eusebius, in his efforts to construct history without materials, eagerly seized upon Philo's description of the externals of the Therapeute order, and boldly declared it to be the earliest Christian church in Alexandria. This view remained unchallenged until the rise of Protestantism, and was only then called into question because the papal party rested their defense of the antiquity of Christian monkdom on this famous treatise. For 3 centuries, the whole of the batteries of Protestant scholarship have been turned on this main proposition of the Roman and Greek churches. For if the treatise were genuine, then the earliest church was a community of rigid ascetics, men and women. Monkdom, the bête noire of Protestantism, was coeval with the origins. These 3 centuries of attack have finally evolved a theory which, on its perfection by Gratz, Nicholas, and Lucius, has been accepted by nearly all our leading Protestant scholars and is claimed to have demolished the objectionable document forever. According to this theory, the Therapeutae are still Christians, as they were for Eusebius, but no longer of a primitive caste, for the ascription of the work to Philo is declared to be false, and the ascetics described therein to be in reality monks of about the year 300 A.D., within a few years of which the date of this treatise is assumed to have been forged. The consequence is that every recent Protestant church history, dictionary, and encyclopedia, when treating of the Therapeutes, is plentifully besprinkled with references to the ingenious invention called the pseudo-Philo. This pyramid of the origins was kept propped upon its apex until 1895, when Conibear's work was published, and all the props knocked out from under it. Strange to say, it was then, and only then, when that a critical text of this so violently attacked treatise was placed in our hands. At last, all the manuscripts and versions have been collated. With relentless persistence, Conibear has marshaled his testimonia, and with admirable patience paralleled every distinctive phrase and technical expression with voluminous citations from the rest of Philo's works, to which there is so prevalent and regrettable an ignorance. To this he has added an extensive excursus on the Philonian authorship of the tract. If Philo did not write the De Vita Contemplativa, then every canon of literary criticism is a delusion. The evidence adduced by the sometime fellow of University College for the authenticity of the treatise is irresistible. We have thus a new departure in Philonian research. The danger to certain orthodox presumptions, which a thorough study of the rest of Philo's works would threaten, is evidenced by the concluding paragraph of Conybeare's preface, where he writes, "It is barely credible, and somewhat of a reproach to Oxford as a place of learning, that not a single line of Philo, nor any work bearing specially on him, is recommended to be read by students in our honest school of theology, and that, although this most spiritual of authors is by the admission, tacit or express, of a long line of Catholic teachers from Eusebius and Ambrose in the 4th century, down to Bull and Dollinger in our modern times, the father not only of Christian exegesis, but also, to great extent, of Christian dogmatics. It is thus established that the De Vita Contemplativa is a genuine Philonian tract. As to its date, we are confronted with some difficulties, but the expert opinion of Conybeare assures us that every reperusal of the works of Philo confirms my feeling that the DUC is one of his earliest works. Now, as Philo was born about the year 30 BC, the date of the treatise may be roughly ascribed to the first quarter of the 1st century, about the year 22 or 23. Really? He was 7? 7 to 10, right? What? 7 or 8. The question naturally arises, at such a date, can the therapeutes of Philo be identified with the earliest Christian church of Alexandria? No. If the accepted dates of the origin are correct, the answer must be emphatically no. That's what I'm saying. If, on the contrary, the accepted dates are incorrect, then a vast problem is opened up, of the first importance for the origins of the Christian faith. Be this as it may, the contents of the DVC are of immense importance and interest as affording us a glimpse into those mysterious communities in which the Christians for so many centuries recognized their forerunners. The therapeutes were not Christians. Philo knows absolutely nothing of Christianity in any possible sense in which the word is used today. Who, then, were they? The answer to this question demands an entire reformulation of the accepted history of the origins. The treatise bears in some manuscripts the superscription, "The Supplicants," or "Concerning the Virtues," Book 4, or "Concerning the Virtue of the Supplicants," Book 4. By suppliant, Philo tells us he means one who has fled to God and taken refuge with him. Call me that. It is highly probable that our tract formed part of the 4th book of Philo's voluminous work, De Legatione, fragments of which have survived. Time and Christian editors have truncated the De Legatione into a threefold way. Firstly, a good part of the 2nd book has been removed, perhaps because it ran counter to Christian tradition concerning Pontius Pilate. Secondly, the entire 4th book was removed as forming a whole by itself, and the first part of it has been lost, all except a scrap on the Essenes which Eusebius has preserved to us in the Preparatatio Evangelica, while the account of the Therapeutae was put by itself and preserved as a separate book. Thirdly, the palinode which formed the 5th book has been lost. But to the tractate itself. Philo, on the contemplative life. As I have already treated of the Essenes, who assiduously practice the religious life of action, carrying it out in all, or not to speak too presumptuously, in most of its degrees, I will at once, following the sequence of my subject, proceed to say as much as is proper concerning those who embrace the life of contemplation, and that too without adding anything of my own to better the matter, as all the poets and history writers are accustomed to do in the scarcity of good material, but artlessly holding to the truth itself, for even the most skilful writer, I know, will fail to speak in accordance with her. Nevertheless, the endeavor must be made, and we must struggle through with it, for the greatness of the virtue of these men ought not to be a cause of silence for those who deem it right that no good thing should be kept silent. Now the purpose of our wisdom lovers is immediately apparent from their name. They are called therapeutai and therapeutrides, men and women, in the original sense of the word, either because they profess an art of healing superior to that in use in cities, for that only heals bodies, whereas this heals our souls as well when laid off by the difficulty and scarce curable diseases, which pleasure and desire, and grief and fear, selfishness and folly, and injustice, and the endless multitude of passions and vices inflict upon them. Or else, because they have been schooled by nature and the sacred laws to preserve that which is better than the good, and purer than the one, and more ancient than the monad. Philo here indulges in a digression, contrasting the unintelligent worship of externals by the misinstructed in all religions with the worship of the true deity by those who follow the contemplative life. Those who are content to worship externals are blind. Let them, then, remain deprived of sight. But he adds significantly that he is not speaking of the sight of the body, but that of the soul, by which alone truth and falsehood are distinguished from each other. But as for the race of the devotees, the therapeutes, who are ever taught more and more to see, let them strive for the intuition of that which is. Let them transcend the sun which men perceive, and gaze upon the light beyond. Never ever, nor ever leave this rank, order, space, or plane, which leads to perfect blessedness. Now, they who betake themselves to the divine service do so, not because of any custom or on someone's advice or appeal, but carried away with heavenly love, like those initiated into Bacchic and Corybantic mysteries. They are afire with God until they behold the object of their love. Then it is that, through their yearning for that deathless and blessed life, thinking that their mortal life is already ended, they leave their possessions to their sons or daughters, or, may be, other relatives, with willing resolution making them their heirs before the time, while those who have no relatives give their property to their companions and friends. In a digression, Philo points out the difference between the sober, orderly abandonment of property to follow the philosophic life, which he praises, and the wild exaggerations of the popular legends, which told how Anaxagoras and Democritus, when seized with the love of wisdom, allowed all their estates to be devoured by cattle. Whenever, then, our wisdom lovers take the step of renouncing their goods, they are no longer enticed away by anyone, but hurry on without once turning back, leaving behind them brethren, children, wives, parents, the multitudinous ties of relationship and bonds of friendship, their native lands in which they have been born and reared. For the habitual is a drag and most powerful allurement. Nor do they emigrate to some other city, like illicit or worthless slaves, who, in claiming purchase from their owners, only procure for themselves a change of masters, and not freedom. For every city, even the best governed ones, is full of innumerable tumults, forms of destruction, and disorders which would be insupportable to man who has once taken wisdom as a guide. But they make their abode outside the walls, shut in, woods, or enclosed lands in pursuit of solitude, and this, not to indulge any feeling of churlish dislike to their fellow men, but from a knowledge that the continual contact with those of dispositions dissimilar to their own is unprofitable and harmful. Now, this natural class of men, lit race, is to be found in many parts of the inhabited world, both the Grecian and non-Grecian worlds sharing in the perfect good. In Egypt, there are crowds of them in every province, or nome as they call it, and especially round Alexandria, for they who are in every way, or every nome, the most highly advanced, come as colonists, as it were, to the therapeutic fatherland, to a spot exceedingly well adapted for the purpose, perched on a fairly high terrace, small plateau, or group of small hills, overlooking Lake Morea, or Lake Meritoa, immediately south of Alexandria, in a most favorable situation, both for security and mildness of temperature. Security, sky from robbers, is ensured by the belt of homesteads and villages, which surrounds the terrace, and the mildness of temperature is due to the continual breezes sent up by the lake, which opens into the sea, and from the proximity of the open sea itself. The breezes from the sea are light, while those from the lake are heavy, and their combinations produces a most healthy condition of the atmosphere. The dwellings of the community are very simple, merely providing shelter against the two greatest necessities, the extreme heat of the sun and the extreme cold of the air. The dwellings are not close together as those in towns, for neighborhood is irksome and unpleasing to those who are seeking for solitude, nor are they far apart because of the intercourse which is so dear to them, and also for mutual help in case of attack by robbers. In each dwelling is a sacred place called a shrine or monastery, a small chamber, closet, or cell, in which, in solitude, they perform the mysteries of the holy life, taking into it neither drink nor food nor anything else requisite for the needs of the body, but only the laws and inspired sayings of prophets and hymns and the rest, whereby knowledge and devotion grow together and are perfected. Thus they preserve an unbroken memory of God, so that even in their dream consciousness nothing is presented to their minds but the glories of the divine virtues and powers. Hence, many of them give out rhythmic doctrines to the sacred wisdom which they have obtained in the visions of dream life. Twice a day, at dawn and even, they are accustomed to offer up prayers as the sun rises, praying for the sunshine, the real sunshine, that their minds may be filled with heavenly light, and as it sets, praying that their soul, completely lightened of the lust of senses and sensations, may withdraw to its own congregation and council chamber, there to track out truth. The whole interval from dawn to sunset they devote in their exercises. Taking the sacred writings, they spend their time in study, literally philosophize, interpreting their ancestral code allegorically, for they think that the words of the literal meaning are symbols of a hidden nature which is made plain only by the under meaning. They have also works of ancient authors who were once heads of this school, and left behind them many monuments of the method used in their allegorical works. Taking these as patterns, as it were, they imitate the practice of their predecessors. They do not then spend their time in contemplation and nothing else, but they compose songs and hymns to God in all sorts of meters and melodies, outlined necessarily upon a background of the more solemn numbers, rhythms. For 6 days on end, every one remains apart in solitude with himself in his monastery, as it is called, engaged in study, never setting foot out of the door, or even looking out of window. But every 7th day they come together, as it were, to a general assembly, and take their seats in order according to their age, that is, the length of their membership in the order, in the prescribed attitude, with their hands palm downwards, the right between the breast and chin, the left by the side. Then he who is the senior, most skilled in the doctrines, comes forward and discourses with steadfast eyes and steadfast voice, with reason and thoughtfulness, not making a display of word cleverness, as the rhetoricians and sophists of today, but examining closely and explaining the precise meaning in their thoughts, a meaning which does not merely light on the tips of the ears, but pierces the ear and reaches the soul, and steadfastly abides there. The rest all listen in silence, signifying their approval merely by a look in the eye or a nod of the head. Now, this genuine sanctuary, in which they assemble every 7th day, consists of 2 enclosures, one separated off for men and the other for women. For women too habitually form part of the audience, possessing the same eager desire and having made the same deliberate choice as the men. The division, however, between the 2 halls is only partly built up, some 3 or 4 cubits from the floor, like a breastwork, the rest of it to the roof being left open, and this for 2 reasons. In the first place, for the preservation of that modesty which so becomes woman's nature, and in the second, that sitting within earshot they may hear easily, since there is nothing in the way of the speaker's voice. Now, our therapeutes first of all lay down continence as a foundation, as it were, for the soul, and then proceed to build up the rest of the virtues upon it. Accordingly, none of them would think of taking food or drink before sundown, for they consider that the practice of philosophy deserves the light, while the necessities of the body may content themselves with darkness. Hence they assign the day to the former, and a brief portion of the night to the latter. A number of them, in whom the thirst for wisdom is implanted to a greater degree, remind themselves of their food but once in 3 days, while a few are so cheered and fare so sumptuously at wisdom's banquet of teachings, which she so richly and unstintingly sets before them, that they can last for twice the time, and even after 6 days barely take a mouthful of the most necessary food, being trained to live on air, as they say the grasshoppers do. Their needs be made light by their singing, methinks. Okay, so this is one of those things that I am completely in disagreement with. Fasting serves a purpose, but if you are fasting all of the time, that purpose is negated, right? Fasting allows you to hear from source more clearly. That is the point of fasting. It is not a punishment. It is not doctrine or dogma. Fasting allows you to hear better. It opens up the senses. And so there is definitely a reason to do so in the speculative life, in the contemplative life. That is definitely a thing. I practice fasting myself. I recommend it to others all the time. But it is not a lifestyle. You should not be forsaking food every day, right? Or for extended periods of time. If you are only eating a mouthful every 6 days or so, you're going to die. That is going to happen. And for these people, that is a perfectly acceptable outcome. But it is not for me, right? They were trying to overcome the material by secluding themselves away from the world and not partaking or participating in it. And that is fucking foolish. That is against the intention of you being placed here entirely. That is you misinterpreting your needs. You may need to go on a retreat. It may even be an extended retreat in order to get where you need to be in your contemplative life. But once you have reached that point, the point of understanding, you are meant to spread the knowledge. You are meant to show other people that your light indeed does shine. You are meant to engage with the world. Right? I do that through videos. I want to be more physically involved with other people, but apparently that's not part of the plan quite yet, and I am ready for it when it happens, right? People will be coming. I will be engaged. All of this, all of these studies that we do, this is all groundwork for when I get out there. I am getting to the point of knowing so that when I do get confronted, and that is definitely going to be a thing, I have the ability to articulate correctly the things which I believe. You should be practicing a devoted life, but that does not mean that you abstain from pretty much anything. There are periods of abstinence which you will need to participate in. Fasting from food or sex or even just minimal contact with other people are all things that are useful in limited amounts. But there is no point at all where you are not meant to have a partner with which you are to have sexual relations. There are always a few exceptions to that rule. Some people are literally called to never have sex, but that is a abnormality, right? That is not the normal at all. The normal is that you are supposed to find the person that you are supposed to share your soul with, because that is what sexual congress is. You are supposed to eat healthily, not gluttonously, but with temperance. You are meant to balance between all of the virtues and vices. There are 7 virtues, there are 7 vices. They are coins, right? Anger and love are the same coin, opposite ends. Greed and charity, same coin, different ends. You are meant to be in the middle. You are not to give away everything that you own. You are not to accumulate things simply for having them. It is meant to be a balance. And that is true in everything. That is true in eating. That is true in sexual conduct. That is true in anything that you can partake of at all. You are meant to be balanced, not exclusive. If you are being exclusive, you are doing it wrong. Right now, and so for me, it doesn't even matter what the results are. If you are doing this, you are doing it wrong. Right? There are periods of time when this is a necessary thing, But that is only to where you can get to the point where you actually understand things, right? So that you are free from distractions, so that you can understand. You don't eat so that you can better understand. That is the reason for these. Not because it is pure, right? It is not pure to never have sex. It's not. It is not pure to never accumulate things. It's not. Anybody who is telling you that it is lying to you. Back to the text. Since then, they regard the seventh day as all-hallowed and high festival. They consider it worthy of special honor, and on it, after paying due attention to the soul, they anoint the body, giving it, as also indeed they do their cattle, respite from continual labor. What labor? They're not laboring. They are staying shut up in this house 6 days a week. That is not labor. Still, they partake of no dainty fare, but plain bread with salt for seasoning, which the gourmands supplement with an extra relish of hyssop. And in this is pride, right? This whole situation is pride, right? It is an overtaking of the fifth element, by the way, of pride, right? I am better than you because I exclude myself from the world. That makes me better. I am better than you. I am better than you because my food tastes like shit. I am better than you because I don't partake of anything but bread and water and salt. That makes me better than you. It is pride in its basest form. I am better than you because I am practicing these things. Right? That's what this is saying. I am better than you because you don't do the steps that I do. Right? I take all kinds of steps that most people don't. But I recommend them to you. I don't brag about doing them, right? I tell you that I fast, but I fast, right? It's not that energy. The energy is, this is a helpful thing which you can practice. It is not definitively salvific, right? Your salvation does not rely upon whether or not you eat food with flavor. While for drink, they have water from the spring. Thus, in mollifying those tyrants which nature has set over the mortal race, hunger and thirst, those are tyrants, huh? They offer them nothing to tickle their vanity, but only such bare necessities as make life possible. Accordingly, they eat only to escape hunger and drink only to escape thirst, avoiding satiety as an enemy of and a plotter against both body and soul. That is a complete imbalance. You are not doing life correctly. Now, there are two kinds of covering, clothes and house. As to their dwelling, I've already stated above that it is anything but beautiful to look at, and put together anyhow, being made to answer only its most absolute necessary purpose, and to their clothing it is equally of the plainest description, just to protect them from cold and heat. In winter, a thick mantle instead of a woolly hide, and in summer, a sleeveless robe of fine linen. Sorry. For in everything they practice simplicity, knowing that vanity has falsehood for its origin, but you are being vain, right? That's the part that is really mind-blowing about this. You are being prideful by acting like you're not. But simplicity, truth, each of them containing the innate power of its source. For from falsehood stream forth the manifold kinds of evil, while from truth come the abundant blessings of good, both human and divine. I would also touch upon the general meetings in which they have passed their time in greater festivity than usual banqueting together, contrasting them with the banquets of others. Philo here indulges in a long discussion in which he paints in the strongest colors the debauchery and extravagance of the banquets of the voluptuaries, in order to contrast them as much as possible with the sacred feast of the therapeutes. In the first place, they all come together at the end of every seventh week, for they reverence not only the simple period of 7 days, but also the period of the power, or square, of 7, since they know that the 7 is pure and ever virgin. Their seventh-day festival, then, is only a prelude to their greatest feast, which is assigned to the 50th, the most holy and natural of numbers, the sum of the powers and the perfect right-angled triangle, which has been appointed as the origin of the generation of the cosmic elements. See, but 7 times 7 is 49, not 50. When they have assembled together, clad in white robes, with joyous looks and with the greatest solemnity, at sign from one of the ephemeroots for the day, for this is the usual name for those who are engaged in such duties, and before sitting down, standing one beside the other in rows in a sudden order, and raising their eyes and hands to heaven, their eyes, since they are trained to gaze on things worthy of contemplation, and their hands, since they are pure of gain, unsustained by any pretense of money-making affairs, they offer prayer unto God, that their banquet may be pleasing and acceptable. After prayers, the seniors sit down to table, following the order of their election, for they do not regard as seniors merely those who are advanced in years and have reached old age. Nay, they regard such as quite young children if they have only lately fallen in love with the higher life, but such as have grown up and arrived at maturity in the contemplative part of the philosophy, which is unquestionably its fairest and most divine portion. And women also share in the banquet, most of whom have grown old in virginity, preserving their purity not from necessity, as some of the priestesses among the Greeks, but rather of their own free will, through their zealous love of wisdom, with whom they are so keenly desirous of spending their lives that they pay no attention to the pleasures of the body. Their longing is not for mortal children, but for a deathless progeny, which the soul that is in love with God can alone bring forth, when the Father has implanted in it all those spiritual light beams with which it shall contemplate the laws of wisdom. There is, however, a division made between them in their places at table, the men being a part on the right and the women a part on the left. It should be remembered that it was the custom in Greco-Roman world to recline at table, leaning on the left elbow with a cushion under the arm. The person reclining to the right of another was said to lie on the latter's breast. Cf. the canonical phrase, the disciple who lay on his breast at meat. Perhaps you suspect that cushions, if not luxurious, at any rate of tolerable softness, are provided for people well-born and well-bred and students of philosophy, whereas they have nothing but mattresses of the more easily procurable material, the papyrus of the country, over which they throw the plainest possible rugs, slightly raised at the elbow for them to lean upon. For on the one hand they somewhat relax their usual Spartan rigor of life, on such occasions, while on the other, even at the banquets, they always study the most liberal frugality in everything, rejecting the allurements of pleasure with all their might. Nor are they waited upon by slaves, since they consider the possession of servants in general to be contrary to nature. For nature has created all men free, but the injustice and selfishness of those who strive after inequality, the root of all evil, have set the yoke of power on the necks of the weaker and harnessed them to the chariots of the stronger. So, in this holy banquet there is no slave, as I have said, but it is served by free men who perform the necessary service, not by compulsion or waiting for orders, but of their own free will, anticipating the request of the guest with promptitude and eagerness. For they are not chance freemen who are appointed for such service, but juniors of the order, who have been selected in order of merit with every possible care, who, as these noble and well-born and anxious to reach the summit of virtue should, with affectionate rivalry, as though they were their legitimate children, wait upon these fathers and mothers of theirs, regarding them as their common parents, bound to them with closer ties than them by their parents by blood. Since, for those who think, there is no closer tie than virtue and goodness, and they come in to serve ungirdled with their robes let down, so that no resemblance to a slave's dress may be introduced. I know that some of my readers will laugh at such a banquet as this, but such laughter will bring them weeping and sorrow. Nor is wine brought in on these occasions, but the clearest water, cold for the majority and warm for those of the older men whose tastes are delicate. The table, moreover, contains nothing that has blood in it, for the food is bread with salt for seasoning, to which hyssop is added as an extra relish for the gourmands. For just as right reason bids priests to make offerings free from wine and blood, so does it bid these sages live. For wine is a drug that brings only madness, and costly seasonings rouse up desire, the most insatiable of beasts. So much then for the preliminaries of the banquet. And again, we see an example of not doing it correctly, right? You are an omnivore. It doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter, right? You were created with teeth designed for tearing meat and for chewing plants. You are designed to eat both meat and plants. You are not meant to exclude either one of those. If someone is telling you to go for the carnivore diet, they're telling you the wrong thing. If someone is telling you that you should be a vegetarian, they're telling you the wrong thing. You are not meant for that. The death of these animals is part of the cycle of life. You are meant to eat them. That does not mean to be excessively cruel. That does not mean to keep them in inhumane ways. Looking at the cattle farmers here in America, right? Those type of farming situations are not ideal, but you are meant to eat meat. It is literally part of your DNA. You are made to eat meat. And so you should partake in both meat and vegetables, right? You can have carbs. It's not against the rules. The exclusion of both of those is pride, once again, right? Most of the problems that humanity is going to face is pride. Now, you can overtake of these things. That is gluttony, right? Or greed, depending on the situation. You can overtake of things. That is the problem. It is not the exclusion, right? The exclusion is a whole separate problem. Both of those are prideful. Back to the text. Now, after the guests have taken their places in the ranks I have described, and the waiters have taken their stand in order, ready to serve, when complete silence is gained, and when is there not, you may say, but then there is a deeper silence than before, so that no one ventures to make a sound or even breathe at all hard. That sounds wonderful. The president searches out some passage in the sacred scriptures or solves some difficulty propounded by one of the members, without any thought of display, for he does not aim at a reputation for cleverness in words, but is simply desirous of getting a clearer view of some points of doctrine. And when he has done so, he unselfishly shares it with those who, though they have not such keen vision as himself, nevertheless have as great a longing to learn. The president, for his part, employs a somewhat leisurely method of imparting instruction, pausing at intervals and stopping for frequent recapitulations, impressing the ideas upon their souls. For when, in giving an interpretation, one continues to speak rapidly without pausing for breath, the mind of the hearers is left behind, unable to keep up the pace, and fails to comprehend what is said. While they, on their side, fixing all their attention upon him, remain in one and the same attitude, listening attentively, showing their understanding and comprehension of his words, by nod and look, praise of the speaker by a pleased expression, and the thoughtful turning to him of their faces, and hesitation by a mild shake of the head and a motion with the forefinger of the right hand. And the juniors who stand at service are just as attentive as the seniors at table. Now, the interpretation of the sacred scriptures is based upon the under-meanings in the allegorical narratives, for these men look upon the whole of their law code as being like to a living thing, having for body the spoken commands, and for soul the unseen thoughts stored up in the words, in which thought the rational soul of the student begins to contemplate things native to its own nature more than anything else. The interpretation, as it were, in the mirror of the names, catching sight of the extraordinary beauties of the ideas contained in them, unwrapping and unrobing the symbols from them, and bringing to light the naked inner meanings, for those who are able with a little suggestion to arrive at the intuition of the hidden sense from the apparent meaning. When the president seems to have discoursed long enough, and the discourse, according to its range, to have, in his case, made good practice at the points aimed at, and in theirs, to have met with due attention, there is a burst of applause from the company, as though they would offer their congratulations, but this is restricted to 3 claps of the hands. Then the president, rising, chants a hymn which has been made in God's honor, either a new one which he has himself composed, or an old one of the ancient poets, for they have left behind them many meters and tunes and trimetric epics, processional hymns, libation odes, altar chants, stationary choruses, and dance songs, all admirably measured off in diversified strains. And after him the others also in bands, in proper order, take up the chanting, while the rest listen in deep silence, except when they have to join in the burden and refrains, for they all, both men and women, join in. Then, when the hymns are over, the Juniors bring in the table, which was mentioned shortly before, with the all pure food upon it, leavened bread with flavoring of salt mingled with hyssop, out of respect to the holy table set up in the holy place of the temple. For on this table are loaves and salt without seasoning. The loaves are unleavened and the salt unmixed with anything else. For it was fitting that the simplest and purest of things should be allotted to the most excellent division of the priests, the reward of their ministry, while the rest should strive after things of similar purity, but abstain from the same food as the priest, in order that the more excellent should have this privilege. After the banquet, they keep the holy all-night festival, and this is how it is kept. They all stand up in a body, and about the middle of the entertainment they first of all separate into two bands, men in one and women in the other, and a leader is chosen for each, the conductor whose reputation is greatest, and the one most suitable for the post. They then chant hymns made in God's honor in many meters and melodies, sometimes singing in chorus, sometimes one band beating time to the answering chant of the other, now dancing to its music, now inspiring it, at one time in processional hymns, at another in standing songs, turning and returning in the dance. Then, when each band has feasted, that is, has sung and danced, a pod by itself, drinking of God-pleasing nectar, just as in the Bacchic rites men drink the wine unmixed, they then join together, and one chorus is formed of the two bands, in imitation of the joined chorus on the banks of the Red Sea, because of the wonderful works that have been there wrought. For the sea, at God's command, became, for one party, a cause of safety, and for the other a cause of ruin. Philo here refers to the fabled dance of triumph of the Israelites at the destruction of Pharaoh and his host, when Moses led the men and Miriam the women in a common dance. But the therapeutes of the world could not have traced the custom to this myth. So the chorus of men and women, therapeutes, being formed as closely as possible on this model, by means of melodies in parts and harmony, the high notes of the women answering to the deep tones of the men, produces a harmonious and most musical symphony. The ideas are of the most beautiful, the expressions of the most beautiful, and the dances reverent, while the goal of the ideas, expressions, and dances is piety. Thus, drunken until morning's light with this fair drunkenness, with no head heaviness or drowsiness, but with eyes and bodies fresher even than when they came to the banquet, they take their stand at dawn, when, catching sight of the rising sun, they raise their hands to heaven, praying for sunlight and truth and keenness of spiritual vision. After this prayer, each returns to his own sanctuary, to his accustomed traffic in philosophy and labor in his fields. So far, then, about the therapeutes, who are devoted to the contemplation of nature and live in it and in the soul alone, citizens of heaven and the world, legitimately recommended to the Father and Creator of the universe by their virtue, which procures them his love, virtue that sets before it its prize, the most suitable reward of nobility and goodness, outstripping every gift of fortune, and the first coiner in the race to the very goal of blessedness. With regard to the mystic numbers 7 and 50 mentioned in the text above, it may be of interest to remark that Philo, elsewhere, tells us that the Pythagoreans call the number 7 the ever-virgin because it neither produces any of the numbers within the decad, i.e. from 1 to 10, nor is produced by any of them. The power of the square of 7 is 49, and the great feast therefore took place every 50th day. The number 50 is based on the proportion of the sides of the perfect right-angled triangle, the famous Pythagorean triangle, so often referred to by Plato. The best work on one. The sides of this triangle bear the proportions of 3, 4, and 5, and 32 plus 42 equals 52. Or 9 plus 16 equals 25, and 9 plus 16 plus 25 equals 50. In another treatise, what did I tell y'all about complicated mathematics? In another treatise, we get some further interesting information concerning the 50. Philo speaks of two series, which he calls triangles and squares, namely 1, 3, 6, 10, and 1, 4, 9, 16. At first sight, it is difficult to discover why Philo should call the first series of numbers triangles, but it has occurred to me that he had in mind some such arrangement as the following. All right, can y'all see that? Yes. All right, 1, 3, 7. What is that? 6. 1, 3, 6, and 10, and then 1, 4. That is 9, and 12. Is that what it is? 16. Duh. Many interesting correspondences may be made out from the study of the apparently simple ordering of these points, monads or atoms, but we are at present only engaged in the consideration of the number 50. With regard to the triangular series, 1, 3, 6, 10, it has to be noticed that 1 equals 1. 3 equals 1 plus 2, 6 equals 1 plus 2 plus 3, and 10 equals 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. With regard to the square series, 1, 4, 9, 16, we see at once that 1 equals 1 squared, 4 equals 2 squared, 9 equals 3 squared, and 16 equals 4 squared. Moreover, 1 plus 3 plus 6 plus 10 equals 20, and 1 plus 4 plus 9 plus 16 equals 30, and finally, 20 plus 30 equals 50. So obviously, 50 is the sacred number. Much more could be said, but our space is limited, and those who are interested in the matter can easily work out details for themselves. All right. Numbers are important. They stand for things, right? They are useful in mathematics? Absolutely. They are useful in contemplation, absolutely, but they are not an end for themselves. You can find signs and meaning in numbers. That is a truth, right? If you see the number 111, that means that you need to have an awareness of a situation. If you see the number 222, that means that there's a decision to be made. If you see the number 333, that means that it is time to start acting upon your decision. These things have reasons. I have detailed them in my book. You can find it in the membership playlist as well. I've done it in other places, but I can't tell you what videos it was. But if you are doing complicated mathematics, you're doing it wrong, right? Gematria, prime example. You can find in Gematria anything that you want. If you are unfamiliar with what Gematria is, it is the Jewish adding together of the numbers attributed to the values of the letters to find secret meanings, right? And so someone, we're going to use it for instance, this is not specific, but it is topical to the day, right? If someone believes that, say, Donald Trump is the Antichrist, they can find evidence for that in Gematria. It doesn't matter whether it is true or not, they can find it, because if they spell the name Donald Trump, and they add together what the letters mean, and they write out Antichrist, and they spell out what those letters mean, if those two numbers match, that is considered to be confirmation that this is a true thing. One of the major problems with that is that it's subjective. The Jews didn't use vowels, so that makes things a little bit harder. But on top of that, if Donald Trump doesn't add up to the number that you want, you can say, well, obviously it's not Donald Trump, it's Donald John Trump. But if that doesn't work, then it's Donald J. Trump. And if that doesn't work, then it's DJ Trump. And if that doesn't work, it's DJT. Until you find the thing that confirms what you are already looking for. That is the problem in Gematria. If you are doing complicated mathematics, you're doing it wrong. If you have, if you add together one or two numbers and you get the result, fine. But if you're adding sequences of numbers in order to get to the result that you are looking for, that is a problem, right? If you go into it 50 as a sacred number, then you can go through whatever process that you choose. You can go and prove that. You can find the evidence of it. And this makes sense, right? 1 equals 1. 3 equals 1 plus 2. Yes, that is true. The Fibonacci sequence, 1, 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, is based upon math, right? That one is much more useful than this. This is true. This is a series of numbers. This is something that you can prove through math. Absolutely. But that doesn't mean it means anything. Back to the text. In reading this treatise and the rest of the references to the therapeutes scattered through Philo's writings, the chief questions that naturally arise are: what was Philo's connection with him, and how far can we rely on his account? There is an important passage in his writings which gives us the critical point of departure in seeking an answer. Philo writes, I, too, have ofttimes left my kindred and my friends and country, and have gone into the wilderness, or into solitude, in order to comprehend the things worthy to be seen, yet have profited nothing. But my soul was scattered or stung with passion, and lapsed into the very opposite current. We learn from this interesting item of autobiography that Philo had himself enjoyed no success in the contemplative life. I have, right? That is one of the things that I need to make sure that I point out. As we are doing this study, bear in mind that I have healed myself through the use of the things that I discuss.
A year ago, I couldn't talk to you at all in this tone of voice.
Now, most of my presentation is here because this is my stable voice for now.
This one is still just a little bit weak. My vocal cords are still getting back to where they need to be. But if you've been here for any length of time, you know that this is different, right? Me being able to talk even this long is a miracle.
A year ago, I still had a cyst in my throat, impinging upon my spinal cord, my vocal cords, right? Now your vocal cords are stretched, and as air passes by them, they vibrate. I had a cyst grow into my vocal cords. I was unable to talk at volume at all. I couldn't vary my tone of voice at all. I could only talk in one tone of voice, raspy and barely. You can go back and watch the videos. It is a true thing. This path that I am on, these things that I am relaying, have allowed me to heal myself. I asked for healing. I was revealed to me how to heal myself. I have done that. I have healed my throat, and you can take the fact that my vocal cords are not right and you can say, well, that's not real. I consider the fact that the cyst is gone a miracle enough. But if that's not enough for you, I've healed myself in other very real ways too. A year ago, I was still having difficulty walking. Today, I am running. Through these methods, through the things I am talking about, I have enjoyed success in the contemplative life. I didn't have to go and do all of these things. I didn't have to exclude myself from life. I still have my wife and my children right here. I interact with them every day. I eat food. I drink on occasion, very rare. I don't even like it. But I partake in other substances. I am not some holy man just sitting on a hill somewheres.
I am a real guy telling you real things that really happened to me. I really have changed my life in real, measurable ways through this. And it's not just diet. It's not just exercise. It is literally through doing the magic that I teach.
And so I do want to point that out, right? I don't do that probably enough because I really do live in humility, right? Anything I can do, you can do better. You can do anything better than me. Yes, you can. I believe that, right? That doesn't mean that you're better than me. That means that you have more capacity than me. That doesn't mean that you will realize that capacity. I'm held back by my own beliefs, and you may not have those beliefs, and so you can achieve things that I can't if you have the correct information. My goal is to help you get the correct information. This accounts for his great reverence and high respect for those who had succeeded in comprehending the things worthy to be seen. Now, as Philo never abandoned his property, he could therefore not have been a full accepted member of one of these brotherhoods. In all probability, he belonged to one of the outer circles. As was the case with the Pythagoreans and Essenes, the Therapeutes had lay pupils who lived in the world and who perhaps resorted to the community now and again for a period of retreat, and then returned again to the world. That these lay disciples were men of great ability and insight is amply shown by the works of Philo himself, but that there was a large literature of a still loftier and more inspired character is also evident from what Philo has to say of his teachers. What has become of all these works, commentaries, interpretations, hymns, sermons, expositions, apocalypses, works which arouse the admiration of so distinguished a writer as Philo? It seems to me that though we may have some scraps of them embedded in the Jewish pseudepigraphia, which have come down to us, many of them belong to the now lost precursors of the fragments of the Gnostic literature which have survived. But were the Therapeutes Jews, as Philo would lead us to believe in his apology for that nation? It is evident from his own statements that the community which he describes, and with which he was probably connected as lay pupil, was but one of a vast number scattered all over the world. Philo would have us believe that his particular community was the chief of all, doubtless, because it was mainly Jewish, though not orthodoxly, for they were sun-worshippers. It is, therefore, reasonable to conclude that there were at this time numerous communities of mystics and ascetics devoted to holy life and sacred science, scattered throughout the world, and that Philo's Mareotic community was one of these. Others may have been tinged as strongly with Egyptian or Chaldean or Zoroastrian or Orphic elements, as the one south of Alexandria was tinged with Judaism. It is, further, not incredible that there were also truly eclectic communities among them, who combined and synthesized the various traditions and initiations handed down by the doctrinally more exclusive communities, and it is in this direction, therefore, that we must look for light on the origins of Gnosticism and for the occult background of Christianity. These communities did not, at this time, propagandize, though they may have indirectly been at the back of some of the greatest propagandist efforts, as in the case of Philo. I also think that the latter Gnostic communities did not propagandize directly, and that whatever works they may have put forward for lay pupils, or by lay pupils, were only a small part of their literature. For the people, there were the law and the prophets and the gospel. For the lay pupils, the intermediate literature, and for those within, those most highly mystical and abstruse treatises that none but the trained mystic could possibly understand or were expected to understand. And that is going to bring us to the end of Egypt and Philo on the contemplative life. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult topic. I understand that I hold some unconventional beliefs, and that I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something I apologize for. I am here to relay true information. I am here to help to clarify as much as I possibly can the steps that you can take to take control of your destiny. You can grab hold of your timeline. You can shape your reality. There are rules, right? We talk about those in extensive detail in other places, but there are rules to this. But they are not that you should exclude things, right? Some things you should, right? You should not be throwing your penis around, right? You shouldn't be putting your penis in anything that moves, but you are to find that one person that you are supposed to share your soul with and create progeny. That is real. You are not meant to exclude foods. You are not meant to give away all of your possessions. You are not meant to take to not take pride in your achievements, right? All of these things are necessary. If they were not necessary, they would not be part of life. They are necessary for your spiritual growth. You have to learn temperance. And temperance means that you partake sometimes. It doesn't mean that you exclude all the time. That is not temperance. Temperance, balanced, is I enjoy this thing, but I'm not going to let this thing control me, right? That is temperance. Pride and humility is the same thing. It's not about my accomplishments. It's about I can share with you how you can accomplish the things that I have. That is a difference. You are meant to walk in the balance, not the exclusion of anything. By all means, exclude murder, exclude rape, exclude those things that we know are not good, right? But the things that aren't, right? The things that aren't horrible, you can do those things. You can dance, you can sing, you can drink, you can partake in other substances. You can, in moderation. And that is the important part. That is the most important part. That is the part that all these people got wrong. And that's why it didn't work for them. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow. Throw me a comment. If you agree or disagree with anything that was stated, put it in the box down below. And if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work you would like to see me read or discuss, drop that in the box as well. And if you really like what I'm doing over here, hit me with that super thanks. Consider a membership or picking up a copy of my book. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pit Steak. Peace.